Today I'm going to be ranking all the DLC Remembrance bosses in the order I encounter them on my first playthrough. This is going to be through the lens of my first playthrough character, which was a Strength Faith build, and I'll be using the following criteria to judge them. Number 1, the presentation. This includes things like the music, boss design, arena, and number 2, how enjoyable was the fight. This is highly subjective since what I find enjoyable and what you find enjoyable can differ, especially how we chose to engage the bosses. But that's what's so fun about these tier lists. So you let me know where you rank them down in the comments. And let's get started with the first boss I encountered, Rolana, Twin Moon Knight. Just from one look at her, you can tell that this is a Carian magic knight. The lead up to her boss fight also instills this. A Carian knight, Lazuli wizards. I think that it's great that you find this twin wolf shield right before her boss fight that has pretty high magic damage negation, kind of letting you know, hey, you're about to fight a magical something. Her music is absolutely fantastic. That ethereal choir with the chimes that invoke Rhea Lucaria and Renala, and how all the string instruments are constantly driving, building to that explosive phase transition. Her boss arena though, it is a little underwhelming that we've seen it before, where we fight the Phantom Loretta, but thematically it fits perfectly. It is a real shame that this boss did not get a cutscene though. Her overall presentation though is perfection. I thoroughly enjoyed fighting Rolana. Her first phase is like a training wheel phase. She doesn't deal massive damage, most of it is all physical, so stacking some crab with the Dragon Crest shield talisman allow the mistakes I made while learning not feel as punishing and made it really enjoyable to engage. I had picked up the deflecting tier in the first area and I was really interested in trying it out with this black steel hammer, so I did. I was still trying to learn how to use the deflecting tier. I didn't know that you could just two-hand a weapon and block with it and still get the guard counters and the perfect deflects. So I was using the twin wolf shield, which was actually a good call because it helped me block a lot of the magic attacks. Stacking the deflecting tier with the stone barbed crack tier and the prayerful strikes Ashawara my great hammer. Oh my god. I managed to stance break Rolana during her phase transition and it felt like the most epic thing I had ever pulled off in Elden Ring, period. To me, Rolana combines 3 bosses, Melania, Pontiff Sullivan from Dark Souls 3, and Loretta. When I was learning how to parry Rolana, it was actually really easy because I know how to parry Melania and they share a couple of the same attacks. The difference though is that Rolana does not share that passivity that Melania has in her phase 1. She shares that Carian Phalanx spell that Loretta does, and I think that the Pontiff Sullivan comparison is pretty clear with the dual wielding. I think they even share some of the same attacks. For me, Rolana is a perfect Elden Ring boss. There's only one thing that I didn't enjoy, and that's whenever she phase transitions and those fire pillars that come up out of the ground. I just wish that they were a little bit more noticeable, because it's not like with her fire tornado that doesn't stagger you or anything. These things will freaking yeet you into the air. But yeah, great presentation, great boss fight, very fun, definitely putting in the S tier. Divine Beast Dancing Lion. Whoever at From Software came up with the initial design for this thing definitely deserves a raise. Taking a real world dancing lion and turning it into this weird twisted boss fight, it's just genius. It's so good. And this boss's music might be top 2 or 3. It's just really unique and really enrapturing. Unfortunately, the presentation and music is about all I liked about this boss. To be fair, I did try to do this weird Sword of Solitude in my main hand and the Beast Claw in my offhand because I was trying to fight like Guts from Berserk, and that might have attributed to the bad time I was having. But this camera just fucking sucks. It's so bad in this fight. I should have just fought more unlocked, but you know, you live and you learn. The cloth that's over the boss kind of obscures its movement, and so it kind of makes the attacks hard to read, and it does that weird twisting attack that's just kind of delayed. The phase transitions are cool though, but yeah, for some reason my ape brain just couldn't really read what this thing was doing, so I'm gonna put it in the B rank for Beast. Up next is Putrescent Knight. Stone Coffin Fissure, one of those amazing visual areas that they added into the game. Absolutely breathtaking when you step out there. Doing that long jump off of that coffin all the way down to the boss fight feels like pure cinema. The music is really creepy. It sounds like there's only one singer, which is thematically appropriate, and the boss design itself is just really striking. It reminds me so much of Nito from Dark Souls 1, and this boss arena being as big as it is feels like it's done on purpose considering how much the putrescent knight dashes around. But it's not like it shares any of those common annoyances that bigger boss arenas have, like you're not chasing the knight down constantly. Because if you had to, I'd probably just complain that you can't use Torrent here to catch up since he's on a mount. But yeah, overall presentation is really strong with this fight. I was having a really hard time placing this because while I was learning the fight, I was really not having fun with it. But that was my fault. I was really overcomplicating this fight. I remembered I had this great club from the base game that I had leveled up, since it's a pretty good strength faith weapon, and I had Order's Blade, and this thing looked pretty undead to me, you know, considering it's made of bones. So putting Order's Blade and using Golden Land, it was just GG. It was game over. I did like 13k damage with one combo, and it left me feeling actually pretty satisfied that using in-game tools with a lore accurate reasoning and logic gave me an advantage like this. I don't know, my character's essentially a paladin without even consciously deciding to be one, and to be able to smite some undead knight like this just felt freaking awesome. However, I didn't really enjoy learning this fight. It's just, I don't know, the movement of this thing was really weird. I would have to go back and fight this thing with a different setup to see how I feel about it now, but as it stands, I'm putting it in the B tier. Next, we have Bale the Dread. Now, disclaimer, I am really bad at fighting FromSoft's dragons, and Bale is no exception. But let's start with the presentation and where to begin with this, because I feel like Bale's presentation begins with Egon. Egon screams and yells about him, but on my first playthrough, I thought that there wasn't really anything I could do for the guy, so I hammered him to death. But going through the dragon pit and fighting Dragon Man, and you get that katana that's really good at killing dragons, and in my case, since I killed Egon, I got his harpoons and his great bow, which when you combine that with Rain of Arrows and the new arrow talisman we got and the arrow sting talisman, it was GG for the dragons heading up Jagged Peak. Now, Jagged Peak being pretty empty was kind of disappointing, but it does build suspense and intrigue into what could be at the top. And encountering Bale is just, it's pure cinema. His design being this decrepit dragon who's just too mad to die, and it evokes this feeling to every fiber in your being that you are not supposed to be here. Now, unfortunately, since I did kill Egon, I didn't get any of his epic voice lines here or even know about his inclusion, and I didn't find out till later, but even without that and just being alone gave you a different feeling that you were trapped in here with this thing, and only one you were walking out alive. And again, Bale's music is just, it's, oh my god. When he phase transitions and the music gets really quiet and you don't hear anything, and then it just explodes as he does, it truly invokes that sense of dread. This is a boss that commands your attention. I feel like with FromSoft's bigger bosses, it's really hard for you to read everything that they're doing, but for some reason with Bale, it's just different. Like when he flies up into the air and he's gonna do his slam, the tell is that his toes open really wide so you know when to roll. And then that carries on into phase 2. He just flies even higher, but his toes still do the same tell. And I really love that Bale eliminates one of my biggest frustration with these larger bodied bosses. I'm not chasing him around. He's chasing me around. When he jumps across his arena, but then coils back and does a huge tailspin, but the dodge timing on it, it just feels perfect. When he does that really big bite attack and it encourages you to roll with him, it's like the fight never stops. And I really like that it feels like Bale has combos, and it's only really hard to dodge it whenever he slams his chest into the ground. I would say that this boss took me like 2 hours to get down and get a win, and I probably could have made it a lot easier on myself if I was trying to fight him head on, which I wasn't doing, which I don't know why since it targeted his head. But whenever I got that win, I felt really satisfied. It wasn't like a frustrating, finally it's over. But yeah, this is just another great Elden Ring boss, and I'd be stupid if I didn't put him where he belongs, into S rank. Next up is the Erdtree avatar. Technically, this is the only 3-phase boss in all of Elden Ring, so it has that going for it, but the design of this thing is just really striking, and it's really cool that you get to fight this weird possessed sunflower. Its soundtrack, like all the other bosses, is really good. I feel like it's kind of understated too. It's really subtle with what the soundtrack is doing because there's a lot of staccato notes going on that make it feel really tight and wound. The music sounds like the Erdtree avatar looks, and I feel like this is completely intentional, and if it's not, well then you know what, it would be a lot cooler if it was. The Erdtree avatar reminds me of that thing from Little Shop of Horrors, just FromSoft's version. The fight itself is kind of underwhelming. Like it's okay, it's not bad, but it was just kind of like, this is okay. The boss didn't do anything like egregious or offensive to me, but it also didn't do anything that really wowed me. The fact that it just kind of keeps respawning as the same thing, I know that it introduces a little move here or there, but it's like, it's not really like a new thing. It was really cool that the head took more damage, and I wanted to work that into how I was fighting it. So I got that Smith script shield and tried to discus hurl, and for whatever reason, I just found this really satisfying and just kind of spammed it the whole time. I did use a flame infused Smith script hammer. This was more so just to get consistent headshots more than anything. I didn't really like how it kind of felt like Elden Beast pre-torrent edition, that you had to kind of chase it around a little bit, and then it had those thorn attacks that would cover the whole arena while you had to kind of catch up. This was overall just like a pretty solid fight. It didn't leave me feeling sour on it. It didn't make me feel like overly hyped on it either. I think that putting it in A is completely appropriate. Now up next we have Commander Gaius. Presentation wise, I mean, the pig's the star of the show here, let's be real. DS1 armored boar making a comeback, baby. But now with a pinecone knight. Honestly, I have no feelings towards this boss. I have seen a lot of negative reaction to it, and I mean, there is some bullshit with this fight. Mounted combat is not fun in Elden Ring. I don't know why, it's just not as good as it could be, and this fight seems to want you to fight mounted. I didn't. I said, I'm getting me mallet, and I broke out the black steel great hammer and the great shield and was going for deflects this time, and it wasn't too bad, but it's like I said, this boss doesn't make me feel any strong feelings one way or the other. I think he's just perfectly average. The gravity attacks are cool. Like, he does have a cool move set. I like that Gaius is like FromSoft's version of Porco Rosso, this flying pig man. His soundtrack though, I don't even remember it. I had to look it up and I still don't remember it, and I really wouldn't feel comfortable putting him in anything other than C tier. Metter Mother of Fingers. I gotta be honest, the presentation on this boss is just, ooh, it's good. It's really good. If you count all the build up with Count Ymir and the Finger Ruin quests, which I do, it helps build this anticipation towards the unknown, and I feel like that's what Metter is that cosmic horror element, which Elden Ring teases with like Estelle. The soundtrack for the boss fight sounds like something out of 1960s Star Trek almost. It's just very evocative of science fiction. So the presentation with this boss is incredibly strong. The fight, however, is kind of weird. I managed to beat this boss my first try, so I didn't see the Omega Death Laser this thing can do, or that it could spawn ads or anything like that. And it's not like I was trying super hard to kill this thing. I was just deflecting and trying to figure out what its moveset was. It was a pretty cool boss fight though, and I actually look forward to fighting it again when I do another playthrough of the DLC. But as it stands for my first playthrough, I can see Metter solidly going into the A tier. Romania Saint of the Bud. I just flat out love this boss design. Reminds me a lot of Quelaag from Dark Souls 1, and it's cool as you're going up the raw ruins and you're going through those scarlet rot infested pest areas to then get up to this. Her soundtrack is so good too. It has melodies from Melania's boss fight, giving you that Scarlet Rot connection, and her boss room being essentially a big open rectangle is pretty good since she does a lot of flying around, but I like how unique this boss is. I didn't get too familiar with her moveset because I beat her in one try. To me, that kind of lends itself that this boss doesn't have any really cheap moves, like nothing killed me in one hit. Her phase transition though was some bullshit. Felt like it came out really fast and sudden. It almost killed me. And luckily, since you had to go through a lot of Scarlet Rot areas before getting up here, I had boluses on my tool belt anyway. And Flame Skewer on this Fire Knight's greatsword is disgusting. Overall, solid boss, enjoyable fight, great music, incredible presentation. Gotta put her in the A tier. Up next is Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame, and my god. After Bale, I didn't think that anything could top that boss's presentation. That was until getting to Midra. After the horror show that is the Abyssal Woods, and you get to the manse, you feel like you have some kind of reprieve from the oppressive forest outside, and then you hear Midra. Speaking of the manse, I do like this location. I wish it was a little bit more fleshed out, but as it contained small legacy dungeons, it's pretty unique. It was fun to explore around. It's cool as you're crossing one of these bridges, you can get a glimpse of Midra, and then anything with an illusory painting like Mario 64 is pretty good in my book. The boss fight itself is really unique. The frenzy that you'll build up in the boss fight, you have to stay acutely aware of. His projectile attacks create a cone on the floor, so if you're at mid-range, it's harder to roll out of it. The fight to me encouraged to stay as close as possible, which is going against your better instinct to stay away from him. His melee attacks consist of swinging his greatsword and that little piece of branch he has in his offhand. The greatsword he does more sweeping diagonal attacks with. They're easy to avoid while crouching, and the little branch attacks, while they're hard to read, they are easily punished. The frenzy buildup and fire damage are definitely the two biggest threats in this fight, but Midra himself, he's easily stance broken. You can block a lot of his attacks and his spells with the deflecting tier. And I didn't find this out till recently, but he is parryable, which would have been my preferred method to fight him, but I was pretty hard set on using the deflecting tier. I do kind of wish that his sword and the branch also did madness build up like Vike's spear, but I think that would have been just a little nugget that would have taken this boss to total fuckery territory. But this is a perfect fight to bust out the ailment talisman that you find in the abandoned ailing village, since it boosts your resistance stats for a short time after a status effect is applied. So if he procs madness, which, I mean, he proc madness on me a lot, this would have helped out a lot. I wish I would have used it in hindsight. This boss's presentation too is really haunting. He just looks like a decrepit corpse that is literally the embodiment of madness. And I think it's really cool that his head is that madness flame, like when you do the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending, that's what the Tarnished character looks like. And then his soundtrack. This one, to me, this is the best. This is the best soundtrack in the entire DLC. The other ones kind of switch places, but no, not this one. This one is solid first place for me. I don't know what instrument's making this sound effect, but it sends a chill down my spine every time I hear it. And this choir gets me so pumped I would pledge allegiance to Midra just so we can melt it all away with the yellow chaos flame. Solid S tier. Mesmer the Impaler. The design of Mesmer is just... it's so good. I did think that it was kind of weird how his voice lines changed from the trailer. Like in the trailer, he says the same things he says in the boss fight, but the way he says it in the boss fight isn't as good as the trailer.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
It's like that part-time line from Indiana Jones. The one that they used in the trailer was better than the one they put in the final cut.
Part-time. Part-time.
I've kind of come around to Mesmer a little bit more. I still think his inclusion in the DLC is weird and kind of lackluster, but as a boss, his presentation is really good. We find him sulking in this pitch black room. His music is kind of weirdly somber, but also triumphant, and that his design is kind of like a Roman legionnaire. And I feel like his moveset is extremely balanced. He can seem like he's darting around and he's too fast, but the amount of time it takes him to recover from doing all that, he could be punished so easily. You have a lot of time to heal in this fight. I love that stab move he does where he turns into like a drill bit head and corkscrews at you. He has a very serpent-like style of fighting. He coils and snaps really quickly. That is until phase 2, where he basically is just Shadows of Yharnam 2.0. At least in Mesmer's fight, there's nothing that you think you can hide behind that the snake is just going to attack through anyways. What is this? What is this? And trying to stay locked onto the snakes is just, you're gonna have a bad time. The camera's gonna whip around so much, it's really disorienting. Surprisingly, even with that, this is one of those fights that you're going through and it just did not feel frustrating. It was really satisfying getting to learn this fight. He didn't do crazy damage. If you're having problems with either his physical attacks or his fire attacks, you can buff accordingly with like a liver or a talisman or something. And I felt like the hitboxes on his spear felt really good. Mesmer to me is just another great Elden Ring boss, and he deserves to go in the S tier.
America, a curse upon thee.
Last, we have the promised consort, Radahn. Taking the lore and the story out of consideration when it comes to Radahn's presentation here, I just think that it's really peak. When you walk through that fog door and you see the Gate of Divinity with Radahn just standing there with his arms crossed like the Chad that he is, all the light being cast from behind him as you see him silhouetted in shadow, standing on the other side of a field of corpses. However, I feel about Radahn now, just thinking of this in isolation, it's really, really good. Phase 1 Radahn is actually a really fun fight to me. I like that his music sounds like a bunch of red mane soldiers chanting, and outside of his double slash cross slash attack, nothing felt like this is impossible to deal with. It was cool that he had the stomp attack like Godfrey, invoking that inspiration that he got from Godfrey. And by the way, why didn't we get that stomp attack? The little ground attack that the Crucible Knights, Godfrey, Mesmer soldiers, and now Radahn can do. His attacks are pretty well telegraphed, and he isn't constantly on top of you. He's very aggressive, yes, but he's not like constantly attacking. That is until phase 2, when Mikalel comes down for some Lothric Lorien bullshit. I do like how the music here evolves. You get the higher pitched choirs, which is really, really good. Those bells chiming and the violins and everything just going and going and going. It does match the frenetic pace of the fight, and it is cool to see Mikalel kind of mirroring Sarosh, clasping himself around Radahn's neck. And that's about all the positives I have to say about phase 2. When Mikalel does that huge area-wide attack and it hurt my frame rate more than my health bar, it's not super intuitive when Radahn starts slashing and there's those light projectiles behind you. It's just not the easiest readable thing ever. Thank God they put this Marika's Hairbraid talisman in there because it made the holy damage not as bad, and I'm sure that there's some very smart tactics to fighting this boss, but I was determined to use the deflecting tier like I had on a lot of other bosses. The problem I was running into was that I would deflect and try to guard counter, and I would get hit and interrupted during that attack. I probably could have been more patient with my deflects and just wait out his combo, but I remember I had gotten the dueling shield from the Shadow Keep and I hadn't used it until now, and I was interested in trying it out. And I noticed when I was guard countering, the shield was blocking Radahn's follow-up attack, so I could deflect and guard counter and be relatively safe. So I leveled it up, put Cragblade on it, and was going for stance breaks, which turned out to be the right call. It wasn't the cleanest victory ever. Like, my winning attempt was the first time I saw the meteor attack, so I had no idea what to do, and honestly, it should have killed me. His instant teleport blink attacks, I really had no idea what the heck was going on. At first, I thought that 2 grab fail condition was really annoying, but after learning how to roll that, it was really actually kind of cool. Like, you don't lose by dying, you lose by what Mikalel did to so many others. Yeah, this boss for me is just really a mixed bag. Phase 1 felt really fair, really balanced, and then Phase 2 just felt like some fuckery that I didn't really know how to deal with or really understand, but still ended up getting the win anyways. It kind of felt satisfying to win. It just kind of left me feeling more like, whoa, I'm kind of glad that's over, more than a super satisfying victory. And to me, that's an important telling of how much I enjoyed the fight, which, like I said, was a mixed bag, and I wouldn't really feel comfortable putting Radahn anywhere higher or lower than in the A tier. A unique boss with an interesting moveset, but it's a lot all at once. It's really hard to wrap your head around it. But yeah, that's gonna do it for my extremely factual, correct boss tier list. Leave your list below and let me know how correct I am. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Elden John content. Until next time.